tonight is a man, more than a man, larger than life. He's a guy I met 3.5 years ago. We met in jail. I told him about Sarasota, and y'all know the rest of the story. He's a guy whose heart is for service. Project Exodus wouldn't be what it is today without this man, my friend Paul.
Check, check. Can you guys hear me? Nope. Yes? Perfect. No? Kinda? Sorta? I hope so. If not, I can use one of the other mics. Oh, now it's stuck. The humor. My name's Paul. I'm an addict. Perfect. I appreciate everyone that's come out tonight. I want a big shout out to the people at the Salvation Army that are watching. There's a lot of people here from the Salvation Army or been through the Salvation Army. Yeah? A couple of you. So big shout out to everybody watching. I want to say thank you to, oh, yep, that's kind of loud. Too loud? Maybe? Is it good? All right, good. So tonight I want to talk about one of the key words in recovery that when I came in, I thought I knew what it meant and realized I didn't. You might have to turn that down a little bit. Check, 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 check. Perfect. All right. I want to talk about the word inventory. Has anybody heard that word used in the 12 steps of recovery? Yeah. So when I came into recovery, there was a lot of words I just nodded my head at, and this was one of them. But, I would hear things like, about being humble, right? I'd heard that word in a couple of rap songs, and I thought I was just supposed to sit down after I heard that word. But I would just nod my head like, oh, yeah, be humble, be humble. What does that even mean? Have humility. What does that even mean? I would just nod my head and agree, oh, yeah, have humility. Be right-sized, one day at a time. All of these things I would just soak in. And over time, I had to learn, okay, what does this mean? How do I apply these things to my life? So tonight, we want to talk briefly about what it really means to take your inventory. And I titled this, Is Your Inventory Full? Tonight, we'll be talking about something that separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. Taking your inventory is mentioned throughout the steps consistently. And so we just really want to break that down tonight about what that means. Taking your inventory is a tool that will change your life if you apply it correctly. Taking your inventory means doing a fearless and honest look at yourself. Like taking a look in the mirror and really examining yourself. Your behaviors, your motives, your patterns, and your responses. It's not about shaming yourself. It's not about beating yourself up, but rather it's about seeing the truth clearly so you can grow and accepting where you are in this process. It's like holding up a mirror and saying, okay, what's going on really? What's really going on inside of me? A good way to explain it to someone is taking your inventory means being real with yourself. It's looking at the choices, the reactions, your motives, your patterns, not to punish yourself, but to grow. It's how you break the cycle and become a better version of yourself. In early recovery, for me, I realized I had to take a little bit at a time. I couldn't just try to take it all at once, but it was really easy for me to look myself in the mirror and see the issues and then try to identify how I can work on them. A good thing that I like to use, and I'm going to try not to beat you up with a bunch of Bible scriptures, but one of my favorite scriptures when it comes to taking inventory is 2 Corinthians 13:5, where it says, examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. So these are biblical principles that can be applied through the rooms of AA. AA and God saved my life. Like, there's no doubt about that. I don't argue it. Going through the 12 steps, having a sponsor, having a home group, going to meetings. I know I don't. Tony's looking over here just shaking his head at me. But having that as my foundation and a starting point, was always the most important thing about getting and staying sober, was having that as my anchor. But as I progressed through the steps, I realized really early, like this inventory thing was really important because it was in more than just one step. And it became something that I do daily. I do in the moment. So if you're here tonight and you've heard this word and you don't understand exactly what they're referencing or have a full understanding of inventory, that's what the goal is of this topic tonight. Spiritually, taking your inventory is a sign of obedience. Being able to look at yourself and instead of looking out and trying to find somebody else to blame for your issues. Why does it matter in recovery to take an inventory? When you don't take your inventory, you stay a victim and you, in your own examine patterns. When you do take an inventory, you take ownership of the things that have contributed to where you are. But in a way, you're taking power back from those things that have kept you stuck. Inventory matters because it breaks denial and it stops blame. It builds emotional maturity. It helps you respond instead of react. It highlights areas needing healing, and it keeps you spiritually honest. What inventory actually looks like. Looking at your behavior and asking yourself, how did I show up today? Was I honest? Did I avoid something? Did I react out of ego, fear, insecurity? Asking yourself those things verbally, internally, is really important because it allows you to hold yourself accountable for the things you have or haven't done. It also allows you to examine your motives. Why did I do that? Whatever it is, why did I do that? One of my favorite things to do, or one of my favorite questions in taking my inventory is, how did I treat God's children today? Right? We're all equal. We're all human. And how did I treat another person that's going through that same walk? Did I flick off everybody I seen at the red light today? Maybe. Dennis did. But, no, I'm just kidding. But owning your part in how we treat each other. When we're owning our part, a good example is, did I communicate clearly? The things that I need, my requests. Did I communicate? Did I react out of fear? Or I shut down instead of speaking up? We have to also, when we're thinking of what inventory looks like, we have to think about making adjustments. So admitting when we were wrong, apologizing when needed, setting boundaries, practicing new behaviors, growth emotionally and spiritually. Being able to identify where the change needs to be made, what the change is, and then making the change is the next big step. So many people get stuck. I see it a lot. We all see it. The people that just get stuck in that rut. I always use this example, and I'm not talking about anybody in here in particular. But I remember living in a recovery home, and there was this one guy in our house. Where's Lonnie at? Lonnie, I know who I'm talking about. There was this one guy that worked every day, had a company van, like he made good money. But he'd been living in this recovery home for 18 months. And every Friday, it was like you had to chase him down to get the rent money. Like he was content in that. I remember he got asked to leave the program, not because he didn't pay his rent, not because he wasn't keeping his room clean, but because he wasn't working a program. He wasn't trying, he was just stuck. And I remember he moved out of that program, went to a different program, and that was the wake-up call he needed, right? And he ended up doing pretty good. But it's important to understand, like when we don't look inside and say, hey, what am I doing? Am I working hard? Am I saving? Am I going to meetings? Am I calling my sponsor? Because it's up to us to do those things. Making adjustments when we're not doing those things is extremely important because it requires vulnerability. It requires rigorous honesty with ourself, humility, there's that word again, courage and self-awareness. But remember, you can't heal what you won't reveal. If you won't own it and be honest with yourself about it, you can't heal it. When you take your inventory regularly, you stop letting life just happen to you. And you start showing up intentionally, willing to work on things, and you become teachable and you grow. This is one of the biggest tools for breaking the chains of addiction, alcoholism that held you hostage for the longest time, is being willing to look internally. You know, I'm not going to set up here all night and talk about all the different types of inventories that we could be taking. I could, but I'm going to save that for our panel because our panel is amazing. But I want everyone to just stop for a second and think to themselves what it is they could have done better today. How could you have treated someone better? Did you really put everything you have into making today the best day as far as your recovery? Did you go to a meeting outside of this one, or did you go to work today? If you're not working, did you look for a job? Did you honestly go out and seek employment? If you have spiritual needs, maybe did you call your pastor? Did you read the word? Did you pray? Did you meditate? Did those things just happen to slip you by? And then ask yourself, is that a daily habit? Is that how I'm living every day? Now, if you're here and your answer is no, I do that stuff every day, I don't need no help with it, well, good. You won't be here long. You'll be, off in your own place. But if you are struggling with any of those items in your life, being honest, being good to people, being honest with yourself, this is a good time to really focus in on, are you taking your inventory? A couple other things I want to mention real quick. I brought up the word humility. And this is kind of me picking on myself real quick, but I honestly didn't know what humility was till about 2 weeks ago. I'm dead serious. I would use that word, and I had no clue what I was talking about. I thought it was one thing, but I was wrong. And I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine, and I said, I was willing to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what this means. Can you explain it to me in a way that I would understand? And they said, it means that you're not too good and you're not less than. That you're just right-sized. And it just struck a chord with me. First off, I was mad because my sponsor never told me that. But maybe he did, but I wasn't listening. But under that, it helped me understand that I'm no better than anybody else. Right? Like I'm good enough. But I'm also no worse than anyone else. We talk a lot about having the courage to be honest with yourself when you look yourself in the mirror and ask, could I have done better today? Was I honest with the people I talked to? And having that be part of the change. Like that is a really difficult step to take in life, but is the most necessary change to actually evolve into a better human. There's no shame in admitting you need help. There's no shame in admitting that you're struggling with something. But there's a lot of shame in not being honest with yourself enough to ask for that help. So before we go any further tonight, I just want to say thank you everyone for listening. At this time, I want to invite our panel up. Tonight's panel, we've got Tony, Charles, and Greg. So you guys come on up tonight. You all right? You gonna make it? Let me see that. Just make sure this is on real quick. No. All right, so if I can get you guys to do me a favor, just hold the mics close to your face, as close as you can.
Test.
Yeah,
Hello.
that way people online can hear you. So I'm going to go across. For those that don't know, this is Tony Collins. Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say your full name? I guess so. This is Charles. Y'all can clap. And of course, everybody knows Greg.
Hello.
I want everyone to know, like when I was picking this panel, there was one lady that she wasn't able to make it tonight, and the goal was really to find people that sponsor individuals, like other fellow sponsors that, and ask them, what does it mean to take your inventory? How do you teach someone to take your inventory, and then just your overall opinion and thoughts and your experience of how it's helped you. So I'm going to start with you, Tony, and I'm going to shut up and let you go.
Hello, family. My name's Tony. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And And by the way, humility is not thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less.
I knew I was wrong somewhere.
Anyway, inventory is, I've been sober a long time. I've been through the steps many, many times. I've sponsored many, many men over the years, and I'm still growing spiritually and emotionally and learning truths about myself even as I get into my early 70s. I'm learning more and more truths about who and what I really am. So it's a never-ending process. There was a woman early on, she had 17 years and she relapsed, but she shared something with me in my first year. She said, sobriety is just an ongoing search for truth of who and what I really am, and I didn't understand the gravity of that until I did the most important inventory that I did, which I got, sober in the big book in AA, and I'm familiar with NA and the basic text. I'm sure all of the 12-step programs are pretty similar. But doing the first inventory I ever did, the first time I really got honest with another person and God, when I took all the mask off, and I could only do it to the best of my ability where I was when I was 6-7 months sober. I did my first fourth and fifth step, with a man that we're still friends today over 35 years later, and I see him all the time. He's a great man. I think I shared about him when I spoke a couple weeks ago, and that was the first venture into getting honest and really becoming transparent with another person, because I had always wore a mask and everybody was only, you want to need, as you needed to know basis. I didn't share much about my life. I was a renegade and I kept everything compartmentalized, and I didn't know how to have an integrated life and relationships. So my first important relationship started with my sponsor. And then if I hadn't gone on to the sixth and seventh step, because that's really where my problems are, or my chief activators are my character defects. And fear is the chief activator of all my character defects. When I react and I respond and I don't behave well, But if I hadn't gone through all the steps, I'm the kind of guy that I've got justified anger, And if I stay sick, I can still be, I won't say, an a-hole, and I can still be a jerk. And I can justify it in my own head because I don't want to change, and there's a lot of people who can get stuck, like Paul was saying, that, you get stuck, you can only go so far. You will not stay. Sobriety is like going up a down escalator. It's a spiritual program of action. As the elevator's going down, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. The only thing that changed my thinking was taking the actions that were suggested to me in my recovery, and that was going through all of the steps, learning how to pray and meditate. But the sixth and the seventh step were really the big ones, because I had to start looking at my character defects, the way I carried myself, the way I treated people, And if you don't know, I meant to write this on, but Pagels, it's Paggles. If you want to understand the 7 daily sins, because that's the chief activator of a universal kind of way to look at your character defects, but it's pride, anger, greed, gluttony, lust, envy, and sloth. Now, I know no one in here can identify with any of those, But if I'm having problems with a human relationship or spiritually or emotional, it falls into one of those categories. And it's funny that pride is the top and procrastination's at the bottom, because most alcoholics and addicts are very prideful and can be very lazy, particularly when it comes to change. I don't like where I am, but I'm damn if I'm going to change, And what I had to understand is I couldn't create the problems I had in my life. I couldn't solve any of the problems with the information that created it. So I had to be willing to open up and take suggestions and do the work. If I wasn't willing to do the work, I wouldn't have stayed sober and I wouldn't be here tonight. So I had to do these steps. I went through the sixth and the seventh step, went through the eighth step. I made amends. By the time I got to the 10th step and I was living in the present, they talk about 10, 11, and 12 being the daily living steps, and it's true. I used to hear that early on, and I'd be debate because I like to piss all the old timers off back then, and not conform. I was not really a conformist. I had to be taught through pain and sobriety that these guys were telling me the truth. I needed to listen, and everybody thinks doing a 10th step inventory, at night, where they say we do a 10th step inventory. Well, actually, that's in the 11th step. And if you haven't got through the 11th step yet, then, you'll know when you get there. At night, it says, upon retiring at night, we look at our day. How did we act? What could we have done better? Did we really overlook something? Did we owe somebody an amends, or did we act in a bad manner or dishonest? And I didn't catch it right away, because it says if we're wrong, we promptly admit it. So if I'm wrong and I say something, I've had to leave meetings on my way home, and I've said, because I joke around a lot to give people kind of nicknames and stuff, and sometimes, and I do it. I don't know why I do it, but I do it. But it can be funny, but sometimes it can cross a line. I've said some things in a meeting and on the way home. I said, I need to call him up and just make sure, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings across the line, But that's the self-awareness we have to start gaining, is looking at my thoughts, my behaviors. And when you do an inventory, you put a hula hoop on. And nothing outside of that hula hoop is none of your business. You're looking at yourself with your relationship with your higher power and your walk in this spiritual life, and that's what I've had to do. And I'm not going to be finished. I'm just not going to be finished. But the most important one is, how many in here have done a fourth and a fifth step, honestly?
Right beside you.
Huh?
Right beside you.
Yeah. How many have not done one? Okay. How many here have a sponsor? All right, I ain't gonna throw you under the bus and say who doesn't have one. So these guys are watching.
Who doesn't? Good.
When that many people raised their hand, if I said, half of them are lying like helping. But doing the first inventory is looking at my resentments, It's looking at my resentments. It's looking at what caused it. But look at what I did. What's my part was in it. And I never thought that all the people that I wanted to do harm to, I would end up making amends to when I got to the 9th step, because I wanted to kill everybody in my family. And they're the ones I terrorized, and I was the problem. They weren't even the problem. I was the problem. But, and then, we look at our fears, Alcoholics and addicts, we don't have a monopoly on fears and anger, but we do a pretty good job with it. I had to look at those fears and see what was driving them. And then, of course, my harm in relationships, including my sex activity and my unsavory character that I had when I was out there. So I had to look at all. That's the first. I mean, you can start practicing 10, 11, and 12 before you even do a fourth and a fifth step. If you read the steps, then you can start learning how to just looking at your behavior. Because it says we got to let go of old ideas and old habits. And if we're still doing them, they're not old. Because we're wired that we just keep, I don't know what it is, like we got an automatic recall the way we handle certain situations. They're the things that I had to be willing to look at and be willing to change. And then, there's a spot check inventory, and I'll finish up with this. But what the really change that started happening was in my prayer life in 10, 11, and 12, and looking at my life on a daily basis, how I was carrying myself and how I thought people were perceiving me, and, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's humbling to open up and to show someone else all your warts and explain all your stuff, all your fears, your insecurities, and your inadequacies, and all these things that you've been living with, And a lot of men, it's hard for men with the ego and the macho man. Most men I see all pumped up, I go into prisons. I said, man, you're just a scared little boy in that big body. You're scared to death, really, when you get right down to it. You're just a scared little boy in that big body. You're just trying to you're trying to keep everybody away from you. And that's the truth with most of us. When we got this ego, we're afraid and we don't want anybody to get close to us, and we put on this persona to keep everybody at arm's length. And it's all driven by fear. And we think it's macho and man, but it is just the reverse of that. But anyway, that's all I got to share at this point, and I'll...
Okay, hold on to it.
Thanks, Tony.
My name is Charles, and I am a grateful recovering addict. The reason why I could say I'm grateful enough, because there's a lot of things that's been going on that's been happening that's been true. But as far as the inventory is concerned, I've been around this fellowship since 1990 when I first got introduced. The seed got planted. And that was the day that when that seed got planted, that was the day that when my stepsister got her 1 year and wanted to make it a gratitude meeting. And I was like, what the hell is gratitude? You know, it's like you always say, what is inventory? What is humility? Yeah, I know what all that. But when I got to me and I said, my name is Charles, gratitude, I don't know what that is. Thanks for allowing me to share. You know, that was it. And that was the seed I got planted. As time grew, I've been trying the program for a long time and stuff, and I managed. And when I was living at the one's place, I got a good sponsor. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, you know, I did this 1, 2, 3 shuffle. 1, 2, 3 shuffle. You know, and like you were saying, the 1, 2, 3 shuffle is there. But by the time I got to that 4-step, nope, I'm running. See ya. But when I decided to stick around and I decided I want to work that 4-step for the first time, I mean, it really tore me up because the first person that I have ever put down on that list was not only me, but also my higher power, who I choose to call God. He was the first because I had a lot of resentment towards him. And then as I was doing this inventory, you know, getting all the resentments put out, the greed, the whatever it is that I was constantly doing to the other people, manipulating others into my way and having them to do what I want them to do. That was started getting a little easier. And then I started having to learning what their assets are in my life and what is the liability. And then finding out what fear that I had. And there was a lot of fears, and one of them was the fear of the unknown. What would happen to me if I managed to get through this? Is my sponsor still going to be with me? Of course. He was with me. And, you know, I remember he asked me, he says, you know, this is a really great 4-step. But one question, you still have a resentment towards God? And I was like, no, not anymore, not like I used to. I think I'm letting that go. I'm letting that pass. He says, good. Now we can go ahead and get rid of this. And he started sharing with me about his 4-step and everything that he has done. And as I was getting ready to finish up with my sponsor, after doing it the first time, I looked at him and said, you want me to do the 5th step the same way how you want me to do it when I did the 4th step? I said, 5th step, you're already on step 6. You don't even need to worry about the 5th step. They're like, wait a minute, what? Because what happened is that when I shared my experience, my inventory with him, he was sharing his inventory towards me. And we were actually admitting to God our exact nature of our wrongs together at once. And as far as the 10th step, I remember they used to tell me, is you got to clean your house. And I'm like, wait a minute, how do I do that? Do I got to go and wake up in the morning and clean up everything up inside the house that I'm living in? No, cleaning up my house means is that I need to clean up what's inside of me, what I need to do to change, you know. And it's starting to get a little bit better in my life because I'm starting to learning to be this one individual that a friend of mine that has been teaching me, and that is being selfless, giving in without expecting anything in the results. And I was like, you know what, I want to be like him because he's a great guy. Being selfless, not getting paid for the service work that he's doing, helping others in his neighborhood, and he's happy. And that's where I want to be at with him. I want to be happy, joyous, and free. Thanks for allowing me to share.
Hey, my name is Greg, and I am a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. So yeah, we're talking about inventory. It's kind of funny we're talking about inventory because I've been taking this meeting to Sally every Saturday. I've been doing it for like a year and a half, 2 years almost. And recently, the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about inventory, the 4th and 5th step inventory, and watching some videos and just kind of collaborating on what's the importance of doing it in the first place. you know, the more we talk about it there and the more we discuss, we realize that, you know, taking an inventory is not something you do in your brain, in your mind. You know what I mean? Like, we watched John McHugh the other day. John McHugh talks about doing an inventory. Can you imagine if a grocery store did an inventory in their brain, in their mind? They went around and looked at all the goods, the perishable goods that they needed to get rid of, and, you know, they seen that the bread needed to be, was becoming expired. To get rid of it, you know, they knew to get rid of the bread. But once they got to the eggs and everything else and the bacon, you would have forgot all about the bread, you know. What is the importance of that? Well, the importance to me is that you have to write this stuff down. I didn't know that. I don't know about you guys, but men don't write crap down. Like, all you girls in here, I'm sure y'all take journals. You know, y'all got everything written down since you was 16, years old. You know, men, we just think, we just think about everything. And then once you get to a certain point in life, there's just so much noise, you can't think anymore. I'm going to tell you a little quick story of, when I first got my sponsor. I was at Greg Flagg's house, Ventura, and Greg walks in and, he did his normal routine, went to everybody asking if you had a sponsor. Well, he got me cornered in my bedroom. I couldn't hide from him. And he said, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I told him no. This time I actually was honest. I told him no, but I was looking. I had someone in mind. He says, "Well, you got 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks to get a sponsor, or you got to find another place to live." And I kind of took that to heart. And I was dating someone at the time. She was going through the steps, and she was changing, right? She was growing. Here I am, stagnant, full of resentment, full of fear. I couldn't see a damn thing. I couldn't see that I was acting like the old Greg again, except the only difference was I was sober. I was dry. So she was like, "You need to get a sponsor or it's over with." So here I got two people that I care about, a roof over my head and my social or my sexual instinct here to stay in this relationship. And so I decided I was going to go and meet up with this guy. I was going to ask him to be my sponsor one day at the Gratitude Club on Sunday. And right before I left, someone knocked at the door, and I opened it, and he says, "Is this Greg's house? I used to stay here years ago. Is this still a halfway house?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, look, I don't know if you know anybody, but I have a house that just came up. I have a room to rent, and I don't know if you know anybody looking for a room, but, it's available." He told me the price was cheaper than what I was paying already. And I'm like, this is a sign from God. You know what I mean? This is definitely a sign from God. Like, this is what I need to do. And honestly, I was full of fear, and the fear was I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to do the work that my ex was telling me or asking me to do. I didn't want to do the work that the guy who put a roof over my head was asking me to do. So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go check your place out." So I Ubered the last money I had. I didn't have any more money. I was broke as a joke. I Ubered all the way over there, all excited. And I walked in, and I'm like, it's a freaking trap house, But the addict and alcoholic that I am, I was like, I was starting to look past the roaches on the ground and the blood stains on the, on the bed mattress, and I was like, I can probably make this work. I can clean this place up. So I'm justifying in my head. But as I'm doing that, I had this other thought. I need to go do what I said I was going to do, and that's go to the Gratitude Club and at least talk to this cat. So I didn't make any decision. I walked to the Gratitude Club because, remember, I was broke. And I went up to him and basically asked him if he would sponsor me. And the first thing that I had to do was basically discuss with him, was this a good idea or not? And he looked at me dead in my face and he was like, I want you to do one thing for me, Greg. I want you to go home and I want you to write a pros and cons list. You see, right there, that was inventory already, right? I've never wrote stuff down, you know. I never was that guy that dealt with things, you know, on black and white paper. So I went home and I wrote a pro and cons list on whether this was a good idea or not. And needless to say, long story short, my cons list was huge and my pros list was very small. You know what I mean? And the last thing my sponsor says is, what in your bleeping right mind would make you believe that this was a good idea? Well, you haven't even started the steps. You don't even have a foundation. You didn't even do a 4-step. You didn't do an inventory. You just did a pros and cons list. This ain't a good idea. And I said, you know what? You're right. This is absolutely not a good idea. And you know what? I didn't go through with it. I stayed at the halfway house, ended up being another 2 years. But I got this sponsor. I worked the steps. I made a commitment. We did the 4-step. And when we got to the 4-step and I started writing this stuff down, I'm like, this is kind of like what I did before. This is the pros and cons list. This is about putting it down on pen and paper and getting your mind wrapped around your thoughts, you know, and being able to go back to it and look at it over and over and over. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of noise up here. And if we don't write this stuff down and really put in the work, there ain't no way that we're going to get past it. We're going to forget about the bread. We're going to forget about the eggs. You know, Nicole's going to be back there eating freaking rotten eggs. You know, if we are in charge of inventory, if we don't write it down. So, but that's, you know what I'm saying, Sal? Hell yeah. But that's all I got.
You heard that, Nicole? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. You know, taking an inventory in the various steps and the various ways really opens you up to identifying what changes need to be made, right? It really opens you up to understanding the path that you need to take. When I'm trying to remember how when I went through my 4th step with you, like I feel like I would write this list of resentments down, like all these. I would take an inventory of like what I was upset about, and every time I'd go to Tony, he'd be like, "That ain't enough. Write some more." And I was kind of puzzled by it, like, "What do you mean? You don't know?" So, but I remember getting so in depth that I had a resentment against the government. You know, I had a resentment against not only all my family members, but I started to realize that all these resentments that I was carrying that were actual real resentments, I would have never been able to let go of if I couldn't look inside and see what my part was in it. And when I go to bed at night, when I remember, and I'm not perfect, you know, when I do an inventory, I always find something, at least one thing, you know, usually a litany of things that I could have done better and could have worked on, and so it's almost like creating a to-do list for the next day, you know, prematurely, like honestly looking at myself and saying, no, I'm not gonna talk that way, or I'm gonna act better in this regard. I think the one thing I remember that has changed in my life more than anything, and it's gonna seem weird, as I used to be late for everything, and you ask Andrew, Joel, or any of these guys that know me, I am like way too early for everything now. For some reason, when I got sober and started taking accountability and doing inventory, because I got so prepared in so many areas of my life, I'm like super punctual. If you tell me that we need to be somewhere at 6, I'm there. I'm getting ready to walk out the door an hour early. Like it's made my life. It's made me understand how important it is to not only be trustworthy, but value just being there and being present, being on time, and being there for the people, for myself more than anything. If you were to give advice, Tony, Charles, and Greg, to someone, and we got some time, we got about 10, 15 minutes. If you were giving someone advice on how to do that, on how to take an inventory, like where would you start? You know, if you got home, it's the end of the day, you're fixing to go to bed, and say someone's here tonight that's never done it, where's a good place to start? Microphone.
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, I needed guidance, you know, I mean, until I worked through the steps, you can only get as honest as you're capable of being honest at any given day, in any given moment, because you can only be as honest as you think you are. You know, you haven't disclosed anything. You still got everything in a tight little box, you know, and the place to start is getting a sponsor, you know, getting into these steps, getting a home group, getting a commitment, and start getting out of yourself and making coffee and greeting and just trying. And I was going to touch on a few things here. This is a good place to start for someone early in recovery. If you want to build I was 327 pounds when I got sober. I had stage 3, 4 cirrhosis from hepatitis C that I didn't even know. I was smoking like a chimney, and I had to start looking at my health, and the book talks about that. You know, we have to look at our bodies as well. We've abused our bodies, you know, as well as our emotional and spiritual well-being, you know. So physical inventory, you know, diet, exercise, healthy eating. What am I doing positively and negatively to my body and sobriety? What character defect is blocking me? Emotional inventory, trying to get my emotions back together, because we get physically sober first, and then we start getting a few neurons and connecting and communicating a little bit. We can maybe say a couple paragraphs intelligently and hear somebody, and we're not, you know, we can start opening our mind up a little bit and start, you know, intellectually becoming more aware. But the last phase is the spiritual development, and that takes time. It takes time. There's no shortcuts to it other than prayer and meditation and learning how to hit your knees and just start saying, and I got some few simple prayers that I use are very, you know, I got a higher power. He don't want to hear tenets and these long, sought out, you know, rote prayers. I don't do rote prayers. I keep my prayers very simple. Very simple. Like, thank you, God. I'm a child of God, and I'm worthy of all good things, you know. And I breathe in, God is peace, and I breathe out, and I am peace. And during the day, I'll just say, thank you, God. And if I'm thinking of God, that's a prayer. So I've learned how to really simplify, you know, my spiritual life. That I don't have to sit down and pray for 45 minutes and think that I'm going to get some extra blessing and a little cherry on top because I was a little more disciplined, and I don't think that's what my higher power wants of me. He'd rather me connect with him a little bit during the day and go out and see who I can help rather than staying on my knees for 45 minutes when I could be out doing something more productive, you know. So the other thing is, you know, emotional inventory. What am I doing for fun, hobbies, social interaction, building trust, and creating healthy friendships in sobriety, healthy people that have a good foundation in sobriety and are doing the deal. You know, am I building those relationships with people? Am I putting them in my network? Or am I going to the guys and the gals on the fringe, the ones that hanging around and kind of visiting? They ain't in yet. They're just hanging around, you know, because there's only two types of people in any recovery program. There's visitors. If you're visiting, what does that mean? If someone's come to my house visiting, I can tell you one thing, they're leaving. They're not staying in my house. So if you're not a member and you don't have a home group and you don't have a commitment and you don't have a sponsor, for all intents and purposes, you're just visiting. You're visiting. So if you want some good suggestions, if you want to get grounded and start learning how to live sober, that's the most important thing I can tell you to do. And the last thing is my spiritual inventory, you know. Do I feel connected spiritually? Am I learning to pray and meditate? You know, asking for my higher power's guidance. Do I have a spiritual discipline in my recovery? If not, what character defect is blocking me? Because that's what's blocking me off from doing the right thing is my self-will and my character defects. You know, and sometimes it's so automatic I can't even. It's so quick. It's like it goes right by me. You know, and it's hard to change. You know, and And it's a conundrum when you don't want to change and you don't know how to change and you don't like where you are, but you're not willing to change. That's a tough place to be. And people can stay stuck there for years, and just live a miserable existence, just trying to just eke on by. Coming in and out, drinking, relapsing, going to rehabs, coming back, going back out. And you can see them just withering away, emotionally and spiritually and physically. They just wither away. I've seen it so many times. So there's no shortcuts to this. So, my suggestion, if you want to get busy on inventory, is find people that are doing the deal and working the steps and get suggestions. And this is a program of action. It's a spiritual program of action. That's the only way I have begun to grow in my life and become the person that I hope God's a little more proud of today than he was when I got here. But it's only been through just, good orderly direction. No, I'm not up here to sell you anything, tell you what to do, you need to do this. All I can share with you is my experience. And that's all I have is my experience. This is what I was told. And everybody that told me to do certain things, they had done it. So it's not like these things that, these orders and, I'm not one of these call me every day, call me at 4 o'clock in the afternoon every day and all this self kind of like important kind of, sponsorship deal, you can, that's just not the way I operate. I just try to let guys, find the way they need to work their program and stay connected. But identifying with your disease and staying connected are the two most important things, is just staying connected. I want you to all learn how to do your inventory, but more importantly, I want you to stay away from drinking and drugs. If you don't get a home group and get healthy people to live around and start changing some old ideas and behaviors, it's just going to be wash, rinse, and repeat. And a lot of you in here know what that's about.
Thank you, Tony. So we got about 10 minutes. I'm going to open it up for questions. There he is. Oh, wait, we need a mic, don't we?
Yeah.
You give Tony's one. There was a wireless one back here, but just use this.
You talk too much, Tony. You're done.
Hey, my name is Eddie. I'm an addict.
Hey, Eddie.
So I heard a lot of things. I'm going to start with Paul first. So, Paul, you said that what does that mean, being able to make choices and stop letting life just happen to me? What did you mean by that? And then next one's for Greg. Greg said something about ingredients that you have to write down and put into action. And all of y'all kind of fit along because then Tony went into and said you have to only be honest as much as you think you're honest. And writing them things down and putting them things into practice. It's just like, praying. I can pray on my knees or I can go out and help somebody. I can spend time on my knees or I can spend time going out and helping somebody. So just give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So when you take inventory, like when you look in, like you start being able to attack the things you need to work on, right? And what I mean is when you just let life happen to you, you just like whatever happens, you don't change. We don't change. We don't grow. We stay stagnant. And right in the beginning, I mentioned there's basically two groups of people, and I say this all the time. And if you're living in a recovery home or you in any form or fashion, you know those people. There's a group of guys or a group of girls that are every day, they're getting up, they're going to work, they got a sponsor, they got a home group, they do their thing, they're growing, they have nice clothes, they got all the good food, like, boom. And then you got the people in the house that just, they ain't going nowhere. They ain't got a sponsor, they don't got a home group, all they care about is this girl they're chasing or this guy they're chasing. They don't grow, and they stay stagnant. There's a lot of people that just let life happen to them, and they don't take the bull by the horns and lead the way. And when you take an inventory and you can be honest and you say, did I give it 110% today? Did I do everything I could do to get out of this mess I'm in? If your answer is no, then that's something to work on, and then that's an opportunity to grow the next day and continue that. So that's what I meant by not just letting life happen to you. What was the other question? I listened to my question.
My name's Salvador. I'm a truth seeker, recovering addict. This is for Greg. It's a comment, not a question. About February 23rd, my second night in the program, I was stuck on Beneva and 41. I had a little motorbike. I was coming back from an undisclosed location. And I was stuck. My motorbike broke down, but I broke down at a church, a Lutheran church right there behind the Pizza Hut. And lo and behold, Nolan told Greg to give me a call. I don't know how they got my number, but Greg didn't ask no questions, but I knew from the Cajun accent in his voice that we both from South Louisiana. We never met before, but he Ubered me home, and he's never asked me for the money. Now, building on that foundation of him treating me the way he would have wanted to been treated, I've learned a lot from Greg. I've learned so much from Greg. He doesn't even know the magnitude of it. That man gets up, goes to work, even when they dressed him like a mechanic doing electrician jobs. He comes home and cooks and cuts his food for the next day, every day. I learned that from him too. We both good cooks. But the most important thing is he has a compassion. He'll give guys 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 10 chances until they hang themselves with their own rope, until he has no choice but to either love them more or eject them. But then I've never seen him eject them to the street. He'll put them in rehab or to another house. That's something else I learned from him. But I got to give a shout out to Greg because not just because we both from South Louisiana, but to be a leader, you have to be humble. You have to learn through hard experience. And he's like my brother. And that first simple, kind act of Ubering me home, Beneva 41 I'd had to push that motorbike all the way home. Probably would have got in trouble with the law. Like I said, I was coming from someplace I wasn't supposed to be. It was about, 11 o'clock at night. He had work the next day. Got me home. Went and got the motorbike the next day or two. And ever since then, I'll never forget it, and I'll always love him for it.
Thanks, Sal. Appreciate you, buddy. Go Tigers. Well, truth be told, it was just too late. I didn't feel like going to pick him up in my car. So I was like weighing two options. I'll just spend the money or, kick him out first day. Figured I'd give him a shot because somebody told me he was from Louisiana, New Orleans at that. I'm like, oh, okay, I got me some family coming. All right. Old Sal. Thank you, buddy.
You sound like you're from South Louisiana. Greg.
Oh, yeah. New Orleans.
You
They're a little different in New Orleans.
I don't think he's a real Louisiana. After listening to you talk,
He says roll tide whenever I
yeah, that's weird.
What's up? My name's Mike. I'm an addict. Charles, my question's for you, man. You've had some dark times, not far away, pretty recently. A couple of them. How do you keep going when your days are dark, and how do you keep your head in the program? When work's hard, everything else is hard. Your car breaks down, it's raining outside, your paycheck didn't come in. How do you keep going?
Thank you for asking how I keep going and how do I keep my head up. It's that realizing that there's nothing in this world that could be able to destroy my recovery. I always constantly look at the consequences of what will happen if I go back out and use again. And as I'm constantly doing that, playing that tape all the way through, I look at the one question or this one definition that an old-timer has said, and he was given a good one about insanity, and that's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, here's another one for you. Does anybody know what the definition of stupidity is? It's doing the same thing over and over again and knowing the consequences behind it. That's stupidity. So for me, I had to be willing enough to say, okay, that's stupid for me to go do this. What can I do to change? And a lot of events has happened in my life. itself. And me being around in this fellowship with them for a long time, the longest I had was 9 years, and I had gone through deaths in the family. And while I'm going through deaths in the family, I was clean. I even got married and clean. I even got a divorce while I was clean. You know, those are the events that happened. But when you go and stop doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, going to meetings, calling somebody, reading your basic text, working the steps, there comes that F word. And the last 2 letters is it. So you want to try that? Go right ahead. But I know for me, I want to face everything and recover. Thanks.
Thanks, Charles. So let's give our guest a big round of applause. Thank you guys so much.
Soft-spoken with a broken jaw. Step outside, but not to brawl. And autumn sweet wind, call it fall. I'll make it to the moon if I have to crawl. And with the birds that share this alone.